message from Mrs. Peterson, our old neighbor. I hadn't heard from her in years. Just her name on my screen brought back memories I thought I'd buried. The message was short, no greeting, no context, just one line. "I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't believe what I saw today." My stomach tightened. I tapped on the video. It was a church, a familiar one, St. Albans, the same place where they used to take me for Christmas Eve services when I was little. The camera zoomed in slowly on two figures standing at the podium. My parents. Margaret dressed in black lace and pearls, dabbing fake tears. Robert, stiff and solemn, reading from a paper with shaking hands. Behind them, a casket. And next to that casket was my photograph, large, framed, flowers around it. I froze. "No." Robert's voice echoed through the phone. "She was always a troubled girl, but we loved her. We did everything we could." My vision blurred. He was reading a eulogy, my obituary. "Though she left this world far too young, we pray her soul finally finds peace." What? I wasn't dead. I was standing in my apartment, alive, breathing, shaking. This couldn't be real. I scrubbed the timeline back, played it again and again. Their faces didn't change. Their voices didn't shake from grief. They were calm, controlled, performed. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. What the hell is going on? Why are they doing this? It wasn't always like this. There was a time when I believed family meant protection, loyalty, unconditional love. That illusion shattered 3 years ago, the day I was thrown out of my own life like trash swept under a rug. The scandal started when the numbers didn't add up. Our family business, a mid-sized accounting firm Robert had built over 2 decades, suddenly had a gaping hole in its books. $80,000 gone, vanished into thin air. The auditors came in, suits pressed, faces grim, and the questions started flying. Someone had been siphoning money for months, small amounts at first, then larger chunks, all carefully hidden in false invoices and phantom expenses. The truth? It wasn't me who stole the money. It was Victoria, my younger sister, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. She embezzled nearly $80,000 from our family's business account. She was reckless, addicted to a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Designer bags, luxury trips to Miami, bottles of champagne at clubs where bottle service cost more than most people's rent. She lived like she was already an heiress, but the inheritance hadn't come yet. So she took it. When the books caught fire and the auditors started asking questions, our parents needed a scapegoat, and I was convenient. I worked in the office too, had access to the same accounts, the same systems. On paper, we were equals, but in their eyes, we never were. I still remember the exact words. Margaret hissed at me in the kitchen, her voice low and venomous, like she'd been practicing. "Better one ruined daughter than two." Robert didn't even look at me when he said it. He stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at nothing. "You humiliated us. You're no longer our daughter." No trial, no investigation, no chance to defend myself. Just a decision made behind closed doors, a family meeting I wasn't invited to. Victoria cried in Margaret's arms, playing the victim perfectly. "I can't believe Claire would do this to us," she sobbed. And they believed her. Or maybe they just chose to. The next morning, I was gone. No money, no explanation to anyone, just silence. They didn't kick me out with drama or shouting. It was colder than that. I came home to find the locks changed. My belongings in trash bags on the porch. My keys didn't work. My credit cards were canceled. My bank account, the one tied to the family, emptied. I tried calling, texting. I sent letters, emails, voice messages that went unanswered. Nothing. My number was blocked. When I reached out to close family friends, the ones who'd known me since I was a child, they suddenly stopped responding. One by one, doors that had always been open slammed shut. Aunt Diane, who used to sneak me candy at family reunions, hung up the second she heard my voice. Cousins I grew up with left me on red. I became a ghost, not just to them, but to the entire world that had once known me. Eventually, I did what broken people do. I left. I moved abroad, took a job in a cafe in a small coastal town where no one knew my name or my story. I changed my number, learned to live quietly, invisibly. I didn't post online, I barely spoke my name. I survived on tips and instant noodles and the small mercy of strangers who didn't ask questions. But even then, deep down, I held on to hope. Hope that someday, someone, anyone, would call. Ask if I was okay. Tell me it had all been a mistake, a misunderstanding, something that could be fixed. That day never came. Instead, something worse did. Last year, I tried renewing my old email account, the one I'd had since college, but it wouldn't go through. When I contacted support, confused and frustrated, the representative sounded uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this account has been deactivated due to a report of user decease." I blinked at the screen, reading the word again. Decease. "What do you mean, deceased?" I asked, my voice shaking. "According to our records, the account holder passed away. A death certificate was submitted." My name had been marked as dead in their system, officially, digitally, completely. They hadn't just disowned me, they erased me. I couldn't sleep that night. The video played on a loop in my mind. Their voices, their fake grief, my face next to a casket I'd never seen. My own funeral. Without me. Something wasn't right. So I started digging. First, I called Aunt Diane, Margaret's older sister. We hadn't spoken in years, but she always used to sneak me candy at family reunions, slip me $20 bills when my parents weren't looking. She answered on the second ring. "Hello?" "Aunt Diane, it's me. It's Claire." Silence, then click. She hung up. I stared at my phone, stunned. I called again. Blocked. Next, I tried my cousins. One sent me a thumbs up emoji and never replied again. Another wrote back, "Is this some kind of sick joke?" No one believed I was me. No one wanted to, except one. Ethan, my youngest cousin, the one who always looked up to me when we were kids. He texted back, hesitant, careful. "Claire, are you really alive?" "Yes," I typed back, hands shaking. "I need to know the truth. What did they tell everyone?" The typing bubble blinked for a long time, like he was choosing every word carefully. Then the message came through. "They said you died in a car crash overseas 3 years ago." My stomach dropped. "They had a whole story," Ethan continued. "Said it happened while you were traveling, that it was too late to bring you home. Cremation, closed casket. Mom cried at the funeral. I cried too. I thought you were gone." I nearly dropped my phone. There had never been a car crash. I'd never even owned a car while abroad. I took buses, trains, rode a borrowed bicycle to work. The story was a lie, carefully crafted, neatly packaged, sold to everyone who'd ever known me. Something in me snapped. I pulled out every document I had, passport stamps showing I'd entered and exited countries legally on specific dates, rental records from the apartment I'd been living in for 2 years, immigration papers, employment contracts from the cafe, signed and dated, bank statements showing transactions, purchases, proof of life. I had never been in an accident. I had never gone missing. So I checked the public records office online, my heart pounding in my chest as I typed my own name into the search bar. And there it was. Claire Whitmore. Date of death, July 16th. Cause, road accident. Status, deceased. Certificate ID, ARF 91327. They forged it. They made me legally dead. I stared at the screen, frozen, the cursor blinking mockingly beside my name. This wasn't grief. This wasn't denial. This was a cover-up. But what were they hiding that was worth burying me alive? I should have stopped digging, but once you realize your own family buried you alive, you have to know why. I found my answer in a place I hadn't looked in years. Victoria's Instagram. She'd gone public again, and there it was. A glittering carousel of images. White roses everywhere, champagne fountains, a diamond the size of a small planet on her finger. Victoria's wedding. Everyone was there. Aunt Diane smiling like she didn't hang up on me. My cousins clinking glasses. Even Great Uncle Theodore, who lived in another country and never showed up for anything. But not me. Not one mention, not one photo, not even a caption like, "Wish Claire." Could have been here. I was gone, erased like I never existed. Until I looked closer. In one of the photos, taken at the reception, there was a speech in progress, a toast. Her husband, James, stood smiling, and next to him, Robert, holding a wine glass, speaking into a microphone, grinning. The caption read, "To the one daughter who always made us proud." And there it was, the switch, not just forgotten, replaced. Curious, furious, I searched the family business registry. A few clicks, and my blood went cold. The trust fund my grandparents had left for me, the one meant for college, for starting my own life, for emergencies, everything, had been transferred to Victoria 6 months after my death. Legally, quietly. No contest, no dispute, because the original heir was dead. She didn't mourn me. She profited off me. I stared at her smiling face in the wedding photos, white dress sparkling in the sun, James's arm around her waist, and it hit me like a freight train. My sister didn't just replace me. She erased me so she could take everything that was supposed to be mine. The bird. The small property my grandmother left in her will? Sold. The life insurance policy my parents had taken out years ago, the one with me as a beneficiary? Cashed. All of it, systematically dismantled and redistributed, as if I'd never been born. They hadn't just disowned me, they'd monetized my death. I sat there in my tiny apartment, the walls closing in, the weight of it all crushing my chest. For 3 years, I'd survived on scraps, on the kindness of strangers, on jobs that barely paid rent, and they'd been living off my name, my erasure, my ghost. Enough was enough. If they wanted me dead, they were about to see just how alive I really was. The next morning, I walked into a law office with a stack of documents and a fire in my chest. Passport stamps, employment contracts, tax filings, lease agreements, flight records. Proof, unshakable, unforgivable. The young attorney across the desk looked stunned as I laid everything out in front of him, piece by piece, like evidence in a crime scene. "You're challenging your own death," he said, more statement than question. I slid the forged certificate across the table. "I'm not dead, but I plan to haunt them." He blinked, nodded slowly, then leaned forward. "We'll start with a fraud complaint and a motion to revoke the declaration of death. It'll take time, but legally—" "I don't have time," I cut in, "because apparently I have a memorial this Sunday." He looked up sharply. Earlier that day, a message had come through from an unknown number. Just one line. "They're holding a memorial for you next Sunday at St. Albans." No name, no explanation. But I knew the church. I knew the address. It was real, and so was my plan. I stood at the window of my apartment that night, the city lights glittering below me like sparks waiting for gasoline. They dressed me in lies, buried me in silence, pretended I never existed. But now I had a stage. Let them grieve, let them cry, let them perform, and when the curtain lifts, let's give them a funeral to remember. Sunday arrived cold and gray, the kind of morning that felt like the world itself was holding its breath. St. Albans had never looked so full. Cars lined the street like a parade of grief, bumper to bumper, some double parked. The heavy doors of the church stood open just long enough to let in mourners dressed in black, weeping, whispering, hugging each other like tragedy had touched them personally. I watched from across the street, black coat pulled tight, sunglasses hiding my eyes, still invisible. It was surreal, like watching a play about a character who looked like me, sounded like me, but wasn't me at all. Inside, the performance had begun. The organ played something slow and tragic, notes dragging like a funeral march. Candles flickered beneath my photo, the same one they used on the fake obituary. I remembered the day it was taken. I was smiling for real back then, genuinely happy, unaware of what was coming. Robert stood at the pulpit, face solemn, voice just loud enough to carry to the back rows. She was troubled, but we loved her. She lost her way, and though we couldn't reach her, we never stopped praying she'd come back to us. Margaret sat in the front row, dabbing tears with lace-trimmed tissues like she'd practiced for weeks. Her sobs were delicate, perfect, timed between his words. And Victoria. She stood next to them, pearls clutched in her hand like they were keeping her heart from falling apart. My sister Claire was complicated, but she was mine. I wish I could have said goodbye. A lie wrapped in a tear, tied with a bow. I stepped closer to the door, just enough to hear it all, to let the anger simmer and sharpen. The priest raised his hand solemnly, his voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. Let us now stand for a moment of silence. Everyone rose to their feet, heads bowed, eyes closed, hands folded politely over hearts. And in that breathless pause, that fragile, sacred silence, I pushed open the doors. The sound was sharp, deliberate. Two heavy oak doors groaning open like a tomb splitting in half. The cold light from outside poured into the church, spilling down the aisle like a spotlight, and I stepped into it, slowly, deliberately. Each heel strike on the marble floor echoed like a gunshot. Click, click, click. The silence cracked open. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few people turned, then more. Whispers bloomed like wildfire. Is that? It can't be. A child's voice pierced the tension. Mom, isn't that her? I took off my sunglasses. Eyes met mine, wide, disbelieving, terrified. Margaret's face went pale. Her lips trembled. Then she crumpled. A hard, theatrical faint, her body dropping into the pew like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. Robert's mouth hung open. The wineglass slipped from his fingers. It shattered against the pew, red liquid spreading like blood. Victoria locked eyes with me and froze. Her jaw clenched. Her pearl necklace twisted in her grip. A half-full glass of champagne tumbled from her hand and splashed across her perfect white shoes. The priest, stunned, took a step back, his hand still raised mid-blessing. I kept walking. Every eye in the building followed my steps, like they weren't sure if they were seeing a ghost or a reckoning. And maybe I was both. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My presence was the thunder after the lie, the consequence they prayed would never come. By the time I reached the front of the aisle, the room was holding its breath. I turned, faced them all, and smiled. Let the truth begin. I stood at the front of the church beneath my own portrait, the same photo they used to eulogize me, to bury me. I turned to face the crowd, dozens of eyes staring at me like I'd risen from the grave. Good. Let them look. I cleared my throat once and spoke into the silence. I heard I died, but I'm here to correct the story. A ripple went through the room. No one moved. Some had phones in their hands but forgot to blink, let alone hit record. There was no accident, no tragic car crash overseas, no closed casket because the body was unrecognizable. I pulled a folder from my coat. Thick, stamped, sealed with government marks and international dates. These are my passport stamps, my employment records, tax filings, apartment leases. I've been alive, I've been working, I've been surviving. The only thing I lost was them. I turned to my parents, Margaret still trembling in her seat, Robert frozen like a statue. They told the world I died, faked the documents, filed a certificate, and when I was legally gone, I turned my eyes to Victoria, who stood frozen, fingers clenched around her pearls. They transferred everything to her. My trust fund, my inheritance, my life. Victoria opened her mouth, tried to speak. I didn't let her. Don't. Enjoy the house you bought with my money. A murmur rose like thunder behind me. Someone whispered, She's got proof. Another gasped, hand over mouth, and then a phone lifted, red dot blinking. Someone was filming. Good. Let the world see this funeral for what it really was. Not a farewell, a cover-up. You didn't lose a daughter, I said, staring Robert down, my voice steady, cold. You threw her away, and now you get to watch her walk back in. The lies were ashes, and I had just lit the match. Robert tried to stand, his face red, flustered. Claire, this is not the place. Not the place? I cut him off. You held a funeral for me. You read an obituary. You cried fake tears over a casket while I was alive, working in a cafe halfway across the world, wondering why my own family wanted me erased. Margaret sobbed louder, but this time no one comforted her. People were looking at her differently now, suspicion creeping into their faces. Victoria took a step forward, her voice shaking. Claire, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice cutting through hers like a blade. You stole $80,000. I got blamed. You got my trust fund. I got a forged death certificate. You got a wedding. I got erased. The crowd erupted in whispers now, no longer polite, no longer restrained. Aunt Diane sat pale-faced, staring at Margaret. Ethan looked at me with tears in his eyes, mouthing, I'm sorry. I turned back one last time. Robert's face was pale. Margaret still trembling in her seat. Victoria hollow, defeated, no pearls to clutch now. You buried me to protect yourselves, I said calmly, each word deliberate. But I came back to haunt you with the truth. No more shouting, no more lies, just silence. Heavy, final. As I walked out, the church bells began to ring. How fitting. A funeral bell. But this time, not for me. The weeks that followed were a blur. I handed the documents to my lawyer, signed the final page, watched the death certificate get torn in half. My legal resurrection was official. An investigation opened into fraud, false reporting, and embezzlement. Let them try to lie now. The trust fund was frozen pending review. Victoria's wedding photos disappeared from Instagram. Robert stepped down from the business. Margaret stopped returning calls. And me? I started over. Not as a ghost. Not as a victim. As Claire. Alive. Free. Vindicated. Sometimes you have to die in their world to be reborn in your own. And this time, I wasn't coming back for forgiveness. I was coming back for freedom.